All right. Well, it is 11:02 a.m. on January 29th, and I will call this meeting to order. I see Mark has hopped on as well. Hello, Mark.
Good afternoon, or no, it's still morning. Forgive me.
Still in the final minutes of the morning, but yeah, I think we were just confirming. Todd just started the recording and confirmed we have a quorum present. I think the only one who's not present in terms for our quorum on this subcommittee is Tony, but I do know that I see Emily Gothard here, who's a member of PRAC. So good to see you, Emily. And we do have a little bit of an agenda. We posted it online, so there's probably not too much surprise as to what we are going to try to tackle and start this conversation off today. But as a reminder to everybody, this is the first, oh, we got a little feedback there from someone. If you're not speaking, maybe as a courtesy reminder, don't forget to mute yourself if you're not currently speaking, just for the good of the audio sound. This is the first meeting of the Public Records Advisory Council's Bylaws Subcommittee. We have a couple of charges that we'll talk about here in a minute, but the ultimate goal is to create a document, of course, of some governing procedural rules for our council. And so, Todd, the first thing I have on the agenda, and should I go ahead and share my screen, Todd, and advance the slides, or do you want to do that, or?
Whatever you prefer, Scott.
Okay, I will do it then. And can everyone see? Oh, everyone went away from my screen. Can everyone see the slides there? Yeah. Okay. All right. Okay. So we've called roll already, but since it's the first meeting of this subcommittee, perhaps do we want to go around real quick and introduce ourselves? And maybe just for simplicity of knowing who's going to go, I'll call another mini roll again. Maybe just say hello and where you're joining us from today. So at the top of my list, I see Representative Anderson. So Representative Anderson, do you want to say hello?
Hello, I am joining you from room 479 at the Capitol. I am a legislator who has the curse and the blessing of living closest to the Capitol. So here I am.
Thank you very much. Glad you're part of our group. The next person I see is Andrea.
Good morning, Andrea Chiapella. I'm the Communications Director at the Department of Administrative Services.
Thank you, Andrea. Mark.
Good morning, everybody. Mark Landauer. I represent the Special Districts Association on the Public Records Advisory Council, and I'm also the current chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Do we have Tony on with us yet? Don't know that we have Tony yet, but the other member of the subcommittee, Todd, you want to say hello?
Good morning, Todd Albert, Public Records Advocate.
Thank you, Todd. And then I also see that we have PRAC member Emily Gothard. So Emily, good to see you. Do you want to say hello real quick?
Yes, I'm Emily Gothard, and I unfortunately had a sick child at the last PRAC meeting. I know I had expressed by email that I wanted to participate on the bylaws subcommittee as well.
Great, that works for me. I don't know if there's any other steps in that process, but I'm going to add you to the roster. So anybody have any objections can let me know. But did I freeze? Everyone still there? Can you hear me? Okay. You all froze for a quick second, so isn't technology fun? Any other members of the PRAC that I'm missing that we want to introduce or say hello to? I don't think so. Okay. All right. Well, then the next topic that we have going on is approval of the agenda. And I pasted it there on the slide there. Basically, we're going to talk about the overall goals and tasks of the subcommittee. And that will probably be the bulk of our discussion today. And then we'll take public testimony if there is any. And then we'll talk about next meeting dates. So it's pretty straightforward. Is there anything anyone would like to change or add to the agenda? If not, I think we adopt agendas by motion. So if not, I'd entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved.
So moved. Second.
I've heard it's moved by Todd and seconded by Mark to approve the agenda. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye or raise your hand.
Aye.
Anybody who opposed to the agenda, raise your hand now or say nay. Hearing no objections, the agenda is adopted unanimously. Moving on to the next slide, if I can figure out where the button is. Okay.
Excuse me, Todd.
Yes.
My understanding is I, as a legislator, am a non-voting member, so I didn't take any action on this. And Todd's nodding his head.
Okay.
I'm just here to listen to you wonderful folks, and I may add some contributions, but I will not be voting or making any motions.
So noted. Thank you, Representative Anderson. All right. Okay, so like I said, the goals of this subcommittee, as we've, I think, talked about it at the larger PRAC meeting, and then as Todd and I prepared for this meeting, I think there are really two charges assigned to this committee in a moment. One may be more timely and time sensitive than the other, but of course, the name of the bylaws committee is the bylaws. So we want to develop a set of rules that will govern the practices and procedures organizationally of how the PRAC functions. But as a part of that, perhaps, but also a companion with that is developing a hiring process for our public records advocate. As I'm sure most folks know, the PRAC has a unique role in that it is directly charged now in hiring the public records advocate. There are many other 400 plus boards and committees in the state, and my understanding is that most of those councils and boards don't necessarily hire their own advocate or executive director of their agency. Most of those are then submitted to the governor's office or to the legislature, and those bodies act on that recommendation / nomination. Where we find ourselves today, and that's, I think, what has been done historically with the public records advocate too. But with recent legislative changes and with a current term of our advocate expiring this year, the PRAC has actually been charged with the hiring process. And so we're in a unique position to be the first group of council members on this council to figure out what that is, what that means. And so so that's kind of our first step, is those are our charges. And in thinking about this, I kind of wanted to ask the council, the subcommittee here, do we do those two things simultaneously, or do we take one on and then take on the other? And just noting there is a time sensitivity because the current advocate's term, Todd's term, expires at the end of October. So we do want to have something in place by then. And I see two hands raised. I'm guessing Representative Anderson, your hand was raised from previous. So I will, if that's the case, which I think it is, thank you. Mark.
Thanks. So my inclination is that we probably need to do these separately. I'm not, we've operated since what, 2019 without any bylaws for the PRAC, and so I'm kind of the opinion that we can probably go another 6 months without bylaws for the PRAC, but we do have to do something about Todd. And so my inclination here, Scott, is that we probably want to address the hiring process first, and then we can take on the bylaws for the PRAC itself once we have a satisfactory product from the first issue here in hiring the PRA. Thanks.
Perfect. Thank you, Mark. Emily.
I agree with that, and we'll want to put something into the bylaws about hiring the PRA, I would think, as well. So it makes sense to start with that, with developing that process to me.
Thank you, Emily. Andrea.
I was just going to say I agree too.
Okay.
Not to be repetitive, but it does make sense to start with that process and then fold that into the broader bylaws discussion, I think.
Thank you. Representative Anderson, did you have any thoughts on that question?
Just like everybody else, I think that's what we need to do. And again, I'll look forward to whatever the vote is. I do have a question. I don't know, as a state agency, not agency, but as a state quasi-governmental body, whether there are procedures we need to follow. Do we need to open it up? Do we need to ask for applications? Or do we have some autonomy just to do what I think everybody wants to do?
Excellent question. I think that is the rub of what we need to step onto next. And So before we move into that, because I do have a little bit of a report that Todd and I've done a little research to the state on that. We still don't have Tony. Is Tony Stewart not on? I don't see the name yet. Want to make sure that if he is here, okay, I don't see Tony on there yet. So Todd, as the other member of this, do you have any concurrence or any other thoughts on which to tackle first?
Well, I agree with the group. I think we should go with hiring first because we have a time certain and it's new to us, even though the PRAC has handled some aspects of advocate hiring and reappointment previously. Doing the entirety of it is brand new, so I think it's better to focus on that. I will say, generally speaking, I'm in favor of less constraining sort of plug and play bylaws that Scott, I know you're familiar with and might not be too difficult to craft and adopt. But given this is our first go around, I do like the idea of focusing on hiring, folding that into a bylaw and adopting it, and that'll pave the way for our future work on the rest.
Excellent. Thank you. I think I'm hearing a unanimous agreement to proceed with the hiring process. I think that's where my mind was going as well. So I think, excellent. We've already made our first decision. Nice work, everybody. Okay, so we'll proceed with the hiring and then we'll revisit the bylaws once that has been developed. I put together a timeline just so that in my mind I could start to map this out, and then hopefully it's helpful for the subcommittee and the public to understand where we're probably going. I imagine meeting at least once every 2 months, have a meeting to keep this process going. Today I see as an organizing meeting and getting our initial thoughts out there, and we can get some idea about the research that we need to do and the next steps. So that's January, February. Then we'll meet again in March and April and bring together some of the research that we put together, some of the processes that we want to borrow from, and start the writing process. Hopefully by May and June, we'll have some draft documents to put our teeth in together as a group and wordsmith. And then I believe the PRAC is next scheduled to meet probably mid-year in the summertime months. So hopefully we'll have a status report on a hiring process that we can share with the full council then. And then, of course, the hiring process begins. And we follow this timeline for the hiring process, and we don't get to the bylaws till perhaps the summertime. I'm not hearing anybody's too concerned that we don't get to it until then. So any questions about basically a meeting every 2 months, about 3 times before the next PRAC meeting? Any questions, concerns with that schedule? Okay. All right, then the task assignment. When I put my head together about a hiring process, and I've been a part of hiring processes here at the city and in other places before, and every level of government, every entity kind of has their own rules. And so pulling together what those rules might be for a state board and commission is, of course, a natural place to start. And so I think the research that we need to start doing is asking those questions of our sister boards and commissions and our other state agencies. And to that point, thank you to Todd for reaching out. We did have a conversation last Friday afternoon with folks in the long-term care ombudsman's office. I think I got that right, the LTCO, about their process. And we learned some things. We got some notes that I can, Todd or I will share with you some things we took away from that group. I'll share that with the committee. Again, I think one of the things that struck me was underscored in that conversation was that they are a nominating committee. So they nominate their council, their board receives applications and then nominates to the governor's office, who then nominates to the legislature for appointment. We won't be in that position. But I thought what was helpful from them is learning how they started the process to begin with, which they began with a review of their current director. They hire an executive director for their agency. They do a 360 review, and they do receive support from DAS HR on that. And forgive me if I'm getting the acronyms and the agencies mixed up, but I think they do get that support and they do that review, and then the review is then provided in a report form to their board. Andrea?
I was going to say, would it be helpful for me to check in with the Chief Human Resources Office to just kind of get a better understanding of if there's like a specific recruitment process for positions like this? I know there's nothing that's exactly the same, but I can check with folks and see if they have a good idea.
I think that'd be wonderful. I think the big takeaway that I'm going to ask folks to think on the next before our next meeting in March is to do just that. Who do you know in your world, your universe can provide us some context and guidelines? Todd?
Well, Andrea, you could certainly, start at the top and probably get an overview, but we do have a DAS HR business partner assigned to our office, so I could provide that person's name as well, and you could interface with her. Maybe she'll know, or maybe you'll have to take it higher since we are pretty unique and everything we do is new.
I think that was my main, thank you, Todd. I think that was my big download from our meeting. Did you want to add anything, Todd or Lu Feng? You were there too on Friday. Anything else you took away?
I would just say I think the board was very thoughtful in their work because it sounds like they too were being involved for the first time in reappointing or hiring a director, and so they sort of took a look, realized they didn't have anything, much like maybe we don't in terms of beyond anecdotal information about how their director was doing, and so they chose to do a 360 review of his work to actually have a basis for making a determination, and then waited for that and its results before deciding if they wanted to go the reappointment route or opening it up as a general hire, for which, of course, the current candidate could apply as well. So I think it is useful to gather information before making these decisions. But yeah, I liked what they did.
It seemed like a good base model to start with. A review of what you've got, so you have a lay of the land, and then they report to the council, kind of within triggers, sets up the the hiring decision point. One thing to note, which I think most folks who've interfaced with government before, they underscored it to Todd and Lu Feng and I on Friday. These are public processes, and there are mechanisms and reasons and situations where interviews and hiring can happen in closed session, as allowed in state law, as we're all familiar. But it can also be done very publicly and in a public meeting. So probably an obvious thing to state, but it was something that a lot of folks forget. Even when you're thinking about a hiring process, you're hiring a state public official, and that's generally done in the public setting, which can be a little awkward to talk about people on air. But that's sort of the reality of it. But those are the big things we took from LTCO. I think we've got maybe some other ideas. Todd, you're going to reach out to a couple other groups, Criminal Justice Commission, to see what they did and things like that. But that's all the research I've done today, except I guess I should mention here at the city, we've, well, I guess that's bylaws, so I won't talk about that. Never mind. Not yet. Any other? Okay, so that's where we are. So the next step that we're going to have to work on between our next meeting now and our next meeting is research. Andrea noted who she can reach out to. Todd's got some thoughts. If anybody else has thoughts about who you can reach out to in terms of the PRA hiring process, that's what we want to do between now and then. The other point that I was going to ask folks to talk about now is, what are your thoughts about the hiring process? You've heard Todd and I and Andrea talk a little bit about the process. What thoughts do the rest of the subcommittee have about important elements to include in this process, or people we might want to reach out to in this research phase? Representative Anderson.
Thank you. I presume we already have a job description of what the staff would do. And if that's the case, I mean, that's obviously where we start. If we don't have a job description, we better get one, especially if this ends up being a public idea as opposed to an not automatic, but a rehire of somebody who's already on the position. So we better have the job description.
Agreed, and I would probably look at Todd to make sure that the Public Records Advocate Office might have that or those materials, and if they do, we'll get copies for the subcommittee. Joe Barker, I see. Yeah, sorry.
Oh, sorry. I was going to say, I think I still should have a copy of the position description I was hired under most recently. But if not, Stephanie Clark, State Archivist, was chair of the PRAC during that period. And any remaining legacy members who also participated, like Mark, for instance, might still have a copy. But I'll look through my stuff and see if I have one first before anyone else has to start digging.
Thank you, Todd. Joe, I see your hand raised. I was just going to say public testimony is the next step. So I wanted to make sure the committee has an opportunity to talk amongst themselves before we take public testimony, but you can go ahead and leave your hand raised if you'd like until we do that next step. So any other open brainstorming thoughts from subcommittee members about the hiring process? Anything you want to get out there before we get too deep? Mark?
Well, just a thought, and I'm pretty open to however we want to do this, quite honestly. I do think we need to provide some guidance for future PrAC members on this. But I do think, Scott, that we may want to have as a component of the hiring process an opportunity for the public to also provide some input at some point during that process, whatever it may be. That's really the only thing that comes to my mind, frankly. I'm pretty open to however this group wants to go forward. I want it to be efficient. I want it to be, easy for people to participate and feel as though their input is being heard. But I just think that as we are the Public Records Advisory Council, we try to allow for the public to participate in our meetings, and I do think that they should have a role, albeit probably small, role in the hiring process as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. I think I concur with you, and I heard efficient, easy, and open. I think those should be some of our bywords. Thank you, Mark. Andrea?
I don't remember the recruitment last. I mean, I remember the recruitment last time, but I wasn't on the PrAC at the time. But I'm thinking back and wondering how many applicants there were, and if the fact that the process was completely public hindered any of that. Just a consideration to throw out there that like some folks may not apply if it is completely public because they, are either currently employed or, don't want to have that out there. It's just something we think about when we're thinking about hiring practices in general. So just a consideration to think about at this point.
Sure. A very public process definitely has a double-edged sword in terms of the pool that you recruit. Other thoughts, Mark?
Well, yeah, here's the challenge, though. This is different than hiring a new public records advocate because we have one, right? And this process is going to be about, do we retain Todd? I mean, that's really what we're doing here. We're not going through a whole recruitment process. So Scott, we may have to address a situation whereby we're reviewing the existing PRA versus hiring one from whole cloth, right? And so I think that there's probably going to need to be a sort of two sections. One if we already have a sitting PRA versus if the PrAC decides to, and Todd, I don't anticipate this, if we were to let Todd go, what's the next thing? We have to go through an entire recruitment process. And I would imagine that would be a national recruitment process that would seek to receive applications, CVs, etc. So I think they're going to be two very different processes that are put together for this effort.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And we do have our current public records advocate on this subcommittee. And when we were talking to the long-term care ombudsman last week, they mentioned that is something that the committee and the hiring panel and the council need to keep that in mind, that the current person's in the job and doing review, and I have no doubt that we will navigate this well. But it is a very part of this. Todd's in the middle of this conversation, and Todd is is the conversation by virtue of the role. So well pointed out, Mark. Andrea, I saw your hand raised and lowered. Anything?
I was just gonna say that it makes sense to have the two scenarios of, because we're writing the bylaws or the rules or whatever we want to call them around the hiring process, assuming that it is a general process and that we won't, if we're writing this for future, I'll call it future generations, we want those to stand on their own and then have a separate process, right, for if there is a current sitting, because there may not always be a current sitting. Todd might decide to win the lottery and move to a private island. Like there's scenarios there, I think, that
Take me
come
with
into
you,
play.
Todd.
I know, take all of us with you. But yeah, I was just going to point that out, and then Mark said it. So there you go.
Great. Thank you, Andrea. Thank you, Mark. Emily, any thoughts? Or anything you want to make sure that we think about in this process as we get started?
I just agree with what has already been raised about both the concerns about how public it is, and I mean, and I'm of mixed mind on that. I wouldn't want us to not be able to consider candidates, and also thinking if we're talking about like if we had a vacancy, because I agree that the processes should be different depending on the circumstances. And I did find the PRA job posting from 2020 that I dropped in the chat.
Thank you. Thank you, Emily. All right. Any other Representative Anderson? I think have you had a chance to weigh in? Anything you want to add at this time?
Surprisingly, no. And I think you're all on the right track. And I don't think I do have some advice, of course, or some comments. I don't think we want to overthink this. We've got somebody in place now, and I presume there might be something in this various hiring guidelines we look at that the first choice is, do you want to open the position up at all, or do you want to move forward with the person we already have? And so that could make everything a whole lot more streamlined, and I think that's a decision that the voting members of the committee should be able to reach by the next meeting we have.
Great. Yes, agreed. Thank you, Representative Anderson. Still don't see Tony, so I won't ask that. But all right. Well, Todd?
Sorry, Scott. An email literally just came in from Tony apologizing for his absence due to personal circumstances. He won't be able to make it today.
Thank you. But hope everything's okay with him. Any other final brainstorming research thoughts? I've really appreciated all the feedback. It's been great so far. If not, then if I can be so bold as to assign the subcommittee members a bit of a homework assignment. When you have your free time and you're thinking on this, if you could reach out, do some Google searching or whatever you have access to, do a little research on hiring practices and put together some thoughts. If you find a good resource and you want to share it with us, please either send it to Todd or I, or share it with the rest of the subcommittee, and we'll make sure it gets posted online with our next meeting packet and shared with the public. So do a little research, put a little thought into what you think a high timeline should look like and what we should think about as we go forward. But I think I'm agreeing with the consensus I'm hearing, that I think we're on a good start. We're in general agreement on what kind of things we want to have, and we don't want to overthink this. We want it to be, like Mark said, efficient, open, and easy. So those are your charges, at least in my opinion. Those are our charges for the next couple of months. And then I just have, it's grayed out there, but you can see, just setting this up so it's not a surprise, once we have our research, then we're going to need a couple members to probably start writing something, putting things together, and then we'll do a review, and then we'll present it, and we can talk about who does the reporting to the council in the summer. So that's really the last thing I had for the subcommittee. I'm going to move on next to public testimony. And I know, Joe, I know it's not as hard when it's electronic, but your hand's been raised for quite a while. I'm sure it's getting tired. But Joe Barker, I see a hand raised. Would you like to make some public comment?
Yes, thank you, Scott. Well, first question I have is Is there going to be a standing order that the public be hidden? Last year, Chairman Mark had indicated that that was the preference. And I'm just clarifying if that is still the preference this year.
Public hidden, I'm sorry, I'm not,
Yeah, like this. Oh, wait a minute. I didn't do it right.
oh, you mean
Like
on
that.
Teams with the video off?
Well,
Like
if
that?
if I turn my video off, then sometimes it gets weird. I'm working on an old laptop. Okay, so it has issues at times.
Sure.
But I was just curious on regarding the hiring practice. Is it going to be bicameral? For example, will there be an actual employment committee that will review the tentative applicants? Once they're scaled down, then will that process go to the larger PrAC board for review, consultation, and their ultimate choice? I do sympathize both with Emily Gothard and Adrian dealing with other employment factors. If someone does make an application and they are currently employed in another area, that might be something that you want to consider as an exception to having the meeting open in public, which under open and public meeting laws, we all know that there is the discretion of whether an individual wishes to go into executive session or in open meeting. Based upon my experience as a city council person, applications after a job description is designed are posted for about 3 months. At the end of that time, then it goes to an employment committee for review, and then the final recommendation to the city council. That would appear to be the standard method of operation for most municipal governments, but I could be completely wrong. Public sector is a little bit different to my understanding. It could be as short as 2 weeks up to 30 days, or until the post is filled with someone that meets the criteria that has been mandated. So that's about all I have to make a comment on. And thank you for allowing me to comment, Scott.
Yes, absolutely. I think this bylaw subcommittee agrees with our larger council that taking public testimony is a critical part of our processes. I will just say, in terms of hiding your photo during committee meetings, I don't remember exactly what Chair Landauer said under that, and he's here, so I would defer, of course, to anything he recalls. But I think it's just part of perhaps a best practice that the committee members would keep their camera on. If you're a member of the public, and you can turn your camera off, that's probably a preferred best practice in terms of being on a Zoom or Teams or hybrid meeting, video conference call. So I'll just leave it at that. I think if you have the ability to, it's probably a good practice. But I'll see your other points, Joe. I think those are all really good observations. And that's really the heart of what the subcommittee is going to be working on in the next couple of months, is answering those exact questions. I mean, is it a public, private? How long does the job description get posted? Do we form a hiring subcommittee of the council to look at this in future years? All good points and all things that we will chew on and write on in the next couple of months. So thank you for your comments. I saw another hand raised briefly. Are there any other members of the public who are here who would like to speak? If not, then I will say that the final piece of business for the subcommittee today is to discuss our next meeting. And I found the easiest way to handle that is to send a doodle poll out. So you will hear from Todd, and I'll stop sharing. You will hear from Todd in the coming days with that poll. And with that, I am open to any other final thoughts or comments from Todd or any of the members of the committee. Seeing none, I just want to say Tom, yes, Representative Anderson, yes.
Yeah, thank you very much. I just want to let people know that there's a fairly decent chance that I may not be here after the short session. I'm taking a little R&R from mid-March through early April. So I may not be here, but I have extreme confidence in everybody on this committee that you're going to do a terrific job. So thanks.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for that. We certainly wish you safe and happy travels and a safe and productive legislative session as well. All right. Well, any other final thoughts from anybody else in the committee? If not, I want to say thank you so much for signing up to do this work. This is obviously not always the most interesting work, creating bylaws and hiring processes, but it is very critical to the success of our council and our functions. So thank you all for being here today. Thank you to the members of the public for joining us. We will see you in March.
Thanks, Scott.
Thanks, Scott. Take care, everybody.
Thanks, Scott. Bye.